excited. Hello, this is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my new friend, Jennifer Kauffman. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited
Oh,
to be with you.
oh yeah. So you guys, you are going to really, really love to learn about what Jennifer does and her brave story and the example that she's making that allows all of us to know how powerful we really are. And Jennifer already was a successful business person. She's a best-selling author. She wrote a book with Jack Canfield and she won awards. And she's written, including that book with Jack Canfield, she's written 3 books and another film that she's gotten awards for. And now she has a new film. But what I'd love to talk about today is the new film and the journey, because everyone is going through these huge, huge, huge changes. And Jennifer has the recipe that we all could follow to enjoy the ride, enjoy the changes. So Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on Conscious Business Zone.
You
Welcome.
are so welcome. And I just want to say, thank you for the warm introduction. And I want your viewers to know it wasn't always that way.
Okay. Okay.
It wasn't always that way. And I think that's where we can start with the journey, right? Is that, for me, I experienced some childhood trauma and some young adult trauma. And most recently, in my early 40s, I was standing 15 feet from the first of 2 explosions at the Boston Marathon bombings.
Yeah.
And, yes, I had some successes in my life. And the truth is, in fact, I had a really successful year in 2012, just before the bombings happened. And yet I wasn't fulfilled.
Okay.
And so that I really want your viewers to know that is that, I had various points in my life where I rose up from, different traumatic situations and had these really great accomplishments. And when I got those accomplishments, yes, I was happy for a brief period of time, but it wasn't sustaining.
I understand.
And I had this what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. I set these goals and eventually I hit some of them. Some of them, were a little too far and I didn't always make them. But when I reached them, I would have moments and glimpses of happiness, but it wasn't sustained. And so this is where I talk about something really bold and audacious. And it's really what I'm passionate about now. What if trauma is a gift? And I know that sounds absolutely crazy. I know when I first, thought of that concept myself, I thought it was crazy. But what if? What if trauma is a gift to help us get us on our path and our mission and our purpose in life? Because now, after going through that horrific experience, and it was horrific, and it took me 4 years to rise up from that experience naturally, and I now look back on it and I actually say it's the greatest gift of my life because it put me on my path, It put me on my purpose, and I feel the most fulfilled I have ever felt, frankly.
Isn't that wild? Well, so this is such a powerful conversation because everyone has a form of trauma and PTSD with the pandemic. Um,
I'm with you on that, by the way.
Whoops. I don't want to get it taken down. So anyway, but the idea of us having the fear of death, which a lot of people haven't ever thought about it. I mean, they thought, if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you got some more time before you have to worry about that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, what if I left tomorrow? Because we had this invisible enemy that that could hit you anywhere and was everywhere, and so no matter who you are, you had to have at least a little bit of opportunity to slow down and consider your life. instead of being busy, busy, busy on to the next project, which I do a ton of stuff. So I'm like you, but hopefully it's purposeful. It's not just to be busy. It's for to help people wake up to their divinity, which is why I was so excited to meet you, because what you're doing, this is classic opportunity to see how powerful you are. So you're in the Boston Marathon, and you were already weren't okay. So you're in the Boston Marathon, the explosions go off, you're injured, you go to the hospital, and you get a little voice in your head. Do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, sure. And just so your viewers know, I actually was a spectator at the marathon that year. It was my first year ever going. But when I was in the ER, that was a pretty chaotic experience for me. I had a lot of doctors and nurses that were talking over me because I had so many things going on with my body. And honestly, I was just like, am I even going to make it to live the rest of the day? And in the midst of that chaos, I was terrified. And I was still, processing all that happened. And it was just so surreal. And I honestly thought I was in a time warp and in a horrific movie. But when most of the doctors and nurses left my room, I heard this soft voice inside my head that said, you need to learn how to heal naturally. Heal naturally? As you indicated, I'm a businesswoman. Born and raised in the corporate world. At this stage of my life, I owned and operated my own coaching and consulting business. I have no idea how to heal naturally.
Right.
So, and yet there was something about that voice that was super compelling. And this is what I talk about in the movie is like, what if we trust our instincts? Even when everyone else around me that day basically said I needed to be admitted into the hospital so that they could figure out all that was wrong with me.
Right.
And yet, I had already started to get a battery of tests and I was being injected with these toxins, and which actually made me feel even worse than I already did. And I was at this crossroads. What do you do?
Right.
What do you do? And I honestly thought to myself, if this was my last day here, do I want to spend it here? Is this how I want to go? And the answer for me was no. And so that was the impetus to go on this journey of learning how to heal naturally, something I didn't know anything how to do. Let's be clear, I was health conscious and, I understood nutrition and I understood, the importance of exercise and movement.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand, I was in excruciating pain.
Right.
So when I say all natural, that meant I didn't take pain medication.
Right.
I didn't take antidepressants and anti-anxiety and all these things that I was prescribed. I had to find alternative ways to deal with that. And I didn't know that at the time.
Well, that's so. The reason I'm so excited about all this is I've worked with healers and change agents and people that use natural remedies for over 20 years. And so when I saw this, it was like, hey, people will identify with your story, and they'll this is the new mainstream. This is going back to the natural, indigenous ways, the mystery school ways of working with the body in harmony with nature and your environment, instead of this sterile. We've grown up with, I have a headache, take a pill. So not what gave me the headache and how can I make sure I don't have the headache again tomorrow? And what is my body trying to tell me?
That's the key. That's the key, is all of this is like indicators. And I refer to it like a dashboard of a car.
Right.
Right. When your body is signaling pain or, headache or whatever, that's an indication to pause, go within and ask the question, like, what's, you might not get the answer right away, but the more you practice this stuff, the more that your body will tell you what you need. You might be dehydrated if you have a headache. You might be, sleep deprived. You might be the lighting environment you're in. Who knows? But tune in. Go inward, not outward.
The other thing I really identified with your story is, and I'm still really identifying with it, is I owned my own clothing store at 28. It was $1 million store. Then I lost it in a divorce, and then I ended up at Arthur Andersen running a division of Arthur Andersen with 80 people, and highly sensitive and intuitive. But my masculine side had to be in place. I mean, this whole, being, I was intuitive and aware, but I had to be masculine. And it sounds like your journey too, you're a driver, you make things happen, and the force of it, the momentum, whereas this whole experience for you allowed you to really be whole, where you brought in your feminine. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's perfect. I did. I was, I started out in the corporate world, and I was really blessed to have risen up to an executive level position in my mid 20s. But I worked for a very male dominated industry. There were very few women, especially very few women up in the executive levels. And I learned how to play with them.
Yep.
And I'm grateful for that, because I had a lot of lessons. And what I also learned was I had to suppress my emotions. I had to suppress certain parts of me so that I could fit in.
Right.
And that's what I did to be successful. So I think this is a really key tipping point, because I believe that's part of the reason why I didn't feel fulfilled, because there was a part of me that wasn't allowed. I didn't allow myself, or I didn't feel it was safe to be me.
Right. Right. Right.
Because if I had allowed that side to emerge, then it might cost me my job. It might cost me my next raise or my next promotion. And and as somebody who wanted to succeed and do well, especially given the trauma I had endured as a child, I was looking for ways to feel good.
Right. Right.
And I associated success as feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It was a coping mechanism. It was a mask, if you will.
Right.
And now you're 100% right. The bombings taught me how to love myself, and it taught me how. Actually, here's the irony: the bombings blew me open.
Wow.
And I felt shattered, and those invisible walls that I put up to protect myself, to make me feel safe in the world, literally were gone.
Right. Right.
And that was very scary for me, because I felt naked.
Right. Right.
And yet it taught me how to love myself and to actually just allow my authentic self to be.
Right. Right. And think of all the energy you free up. So I call that costumes. When I was at Arthur Andersen, I mean, I was wearing my suits and my nice suits, and I had all the accoutrements, the perfect laptop case, and, I mean, all of that, because that was like the uniform. And then what happens is, once you get out of that, the I think social media helped with a lot of us being able to be more authentic, because especially Facebook, there isn't necessarily a professional viewpoint and a personal. It's all mushed together. Whereas on LinkedIn, you can still stay and play that costume game if you want to. But it's keeping those boundaries, those um, and the thing is, those boundaries take a lot of energy to
Yeah.
keep up, and everyone can see through them anyway, but you don't know that.
You don't know that. And so you're doing all this work to look good, and you're expending all of this energy that could be used in other ways. Just be yourself.
That's right. That's
Be
right.
yourself. And I want to share one other thing, though. I want to be clear. I think we are, I perceive, we're moving into an opportunity to rise in consciousness. And what I perceive is that it's balancing our masculine and feminine side, right? It's not masculine is bad and feminine's good now, and it's not that. I perceive that we are balancing out our feminine, masculine energies. And I believe that if we can actually have conversations that nobody wants to have, both, from a masculine and a feminine perspective, I believe together
Mm-hmm.
we can solve some of the ongoing challenges that we face in the world, hunger challenges, peace, or war. I feel like we tend, in the past, we've focused on, mostly masculine ways of handling situations or feminine ways of handling it. What if we actually blend the two together, come together, and look at things from a different perspective?
Right, right. Well, in your movie, which everyone, I'll put up the information here on this banner so that you can see how you can get connected. Plus, I put it in the comments. So I want everyone to make sure that they get a chance to check this out. There's two NFL players on in your movie, and well, there was a lot of conversation about our releasing our shame around talking about all of our stuff because in my view, and I'm a little woo woo maybe, but and not going to apologize for it. um,
Good. You go, girl.
Um, but I think we stood in line to get these bodies, to have these experiences, and to come here at this time during this huge change as being a part of the change, as being a part of the authentic illumination of the truth. And so when the people like Dr. Sue Morter that's in your movie, I've taken classes with her and met with her before. I mean, these people, they're practical. It's practical. So anyway, so back to the NFL guys. Do you want to talk about that? Because that was, I mean, I took notes during the movie on their part.
Yeah, so I actually have something in common with those two men.
Oh,
I was sexually assaulted when I was 11 years old by a man and two women. I did not know them. And so I've met both Reggie Walker and David Carter. And the irony is, David actually shared his story for the first time on film with us.
wow.
So I actually didn't know he had that experience until we actually met. I was interviewing him more for the nutrition plant-based side of things, to create awareness around that, and he actually opened up to that.
Wow.
And so in the film, we talk about what that was like, as children having to endure that, and how for those two men it fueled them to get into the NFL.
Right.
They used that anger and rage that they had experienced from that molestation, to actually to get to the NFL. And what was fascinating is that Reggie talks about in the film is that when he finally came to the place to forgive those that did that to him and to forgive himself, he realized, I don't need to be in the NFL anymore. And he decided to retire because he realized that, like me, he was looking outside of himself for this success and validation for who he is.
Right.
And he realized, wait a minute, I don't need to play football anymore. And so now he is on this mission and purpose to help people who are struggling with sexual abuse. And when I first met him, I actually got connected to him through a mutual friend. And I went to his LinkedIn page and I was like, wow, he had the courage on his LinkedIn page to say not only is he an NFL player, but he's actually, a sexual assault survivor. And now he's big into helping people overcome that.
Right. Well, I didn't realize, I mean, I've heard the statistics that 1 in 4 women have been sexually assaulted, but they used a statistic that 1 in 6 men had been physically, sexually abused, and that their parents knew and told them to be quiet. I mean, just buck up. And that's the other part is, I mean, how do we get to a point where that shame that, you know, if we think of it in a metaphysical way, their soul picked that experience.
Thanks.
Just like but how, and you would say that too. You said
I
that.
totally would say that. I agree with you.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about that concept? Because I think what you share, the way your whole film is a sharing of your journey of healing and healing yourself with sound and alternative healing and energy work and um, courage, basically the courage to have pain and shame and the emotional pain and physical pain and to push through it. And that's the missing piece for most people. As soon as they start to have any pain, like their heart opening could feel like a heart attack.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so I want to say here the irony is that it took a bomb at the marathon to get me to stop. Because
Wow.
the truth is I was running from myself and running from my past because for whatever reason in our culture, in the American culture, I can't speak for other cultures, but in the American culture, we have this notion it's not okay to, to feel or express anger. It's not okay to talk about those things that make us feel shame and guilt and disgust. Actually, right? That no. Let's just bury that in the closet, pretend like it's not there. And but the truth is, it is there, and it haunts you, and it's actually, at least it haunted me, and it's that baggage. And I was constantly trying to outrun it. And the irony is I could not outrun it. And so that's the parallel into my story is that it took being at that experience to stop. And I actually had to face my pain. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that unresolved trauma, when you have another trauma, it's just compounded. So for me, I was having awful flashbacks of the bombings, days, weeks, months, and in the beginning couple of years. But after a couple of days of just having the flashbacks of the bombings, I started to have flashbacks of my childhood trauma. So
Oh,
now,
it up.
think about it, you're like watching, like you might, for me, it was like I was watching, back-to-back sessions of horror movies. And I actually thought I was going crazy.
Oh, wow.
So this is the impact. When we choose not to deal with our trauma and we just bury it, it actually has a compound effect over time. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk actually speaks about it in Body Keeps Score. And so, and we have these triggers that come up. And so the tendency in our culture is to suppress it. No, 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 no. Don't feel it. Don't go there. We suppress it with food. We suppress it with drugs. We suppress it with alcohol, with sex, whatever.
Right.
But the key here is to actually be with it, is to actually be with that experience of pain or emotion, whatever it is. And Christy Whitman talks about this in the movie, is that if we can allow ourselves to be in that pain or that emotion for 90 seconds and let it crest and come out of you, and trust me, it feels uncomfortable even to me today.
Right. Right. Right.
Because I still want to suppress it at times, candidly. But the key is to be with it. Now our heads want to engage. Oh my gosh, what's wrong? There's something wrong with me. No, not necessarily. It's just this wave of emotion. And when we allow it to move through us, we then can invite in the energy in which we want to experience, because we're energy beings.
Right.
So we can bring in abundance. We can bring in bliss. We can bring in peace.
Well, it's the I took Avatar all the way through to Wizards, and that was a big part of the toolkit was being able to push through those obstacles, obscurations, whatever you want to call it, and really realize that that's not me. That was my creation, and love it. Not this is there's so many wonderful things that we could do like 10 shows on this because you have forgiveness, you have so many things. But okay, so right now people are in they're grieving the old normal. The old normal, in my opinion, was so out of balance with inequality for humanity, and so unkind in general that it had to change. And that's what we're going into this time of Aquarius. People had their first awakening, time to spend um, go inward, and then and you had yours early so that you could be a way shower, I assume. And there was a divine purpose because your story is so, I mean, it's shocking. I mean, the whole thing, what would anyone do? You know, we go, I just flew it in the air, and I'm in DIA at the airport, and you know, I don't even think about what you must think about when you go anywhere. You know, I'm like, my little life. And so, you know, you've had an instance where somebody else inflicted their pain onto you, basically.
Can I actually talk about that? Because
Yeah,
that's a key point.
please.
So, that's actually a really key distinction is, for me, when that experience happened, I said I was instantly felt shattered. And, the first year I had to work through my terror and my fear. And as somebody who's very outgoing and somebody who actually lived a pretty big life before this, I literally withdrew from the world
Right.
because I was afraid of my shadow.
Yep.
And I want you to understand that I was like, how do I feel safe again? And my way to feel safe was I would literally contemplate in my mind how I could find them and kill them with my bare hands so that I could feel safe and how others could feel safe.
Wow.
But that's the truth, right? Fortunately, I never took action on that, but that is actually what happened. And then the next year, the second year, so you talk about the grieving process, right? The second year for me, I had to deal with rage. It wasn't anger, it was rage. And because so much of my life was gone. So much, I mean, life as I knew it was over.
Right.
That old way of living and being was gone. I couldn't even access it. I tried. And that was scary. And I think that's what people are going through now. That was so scary for me. And I had to work through that rage. Now, here's the thing, the irony there is that I was like, if I acted on my terror, acted on my fear, and acted on my rage, the truth is I'd be no different than those two young men that placed the bombs that day.
Right.
I would become a terrorist too. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I've got to find a way to heal the terrorist within me. So here's the deal. Those two young men, after I chose to forgive them, which was not an easy process for me, but when I finally got to that place and I forgave them, something happened that I could never have imagined. And then as I had this overwhelming amount of peace that came over me, and for the very first time, I had compassion.
Wow.
Now, over time, as that compassion kind of, continued on, I got curious. And I got curious to go, who does this? And what I learned was those two young men, they were 19 and 25 at the time, actually grew up in a war-torn country, and they had bombs that were placed on their neighborhoods as kids. So those kids grew up in that environment, and they were just acting out on their own rage and their own anger. And so for the first time, I then took that compassion to actually having love for them.
Wow.
And if we can actually address, I now understand that even those people that harm sexually, physically, mentally have also been treated that way.
Right.
And then we have an opportunity here today to actually break the pattern. We don't have to continue on with, if we've been somebody that's been abused, whether mentally, physically, sexually, we can choose to have it stop here.
Right.
And not let that carry on. And that's a choice.
Right. And that's the evolution of our species.
Absolutely.
I mean, because the thing is, it's really interesting. I have this prayer that's from Howard Wills, and he calls it a personal cleansing prayer. It says, God, please help me forgive all people forgive me. Help us all forgive ourselves. Please, God, thank you, God, amen. Thank you, God, amen. And when I first started using this, it's help us all forgive ourselves. That got me, or all people forgive me, because when you really think of the victim, the the self-righteous victim, if you want to even use that, you don't really think about what you went through, where you actually put yourself in their shoes. Most people, it's, I'm justified. I'll never talk to them again. I'm going to tell other people about them, blah, 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 blah. And really, truly, the path to wholeness is asking, because we don't know what we triggered either in anybody. A simple thought, spoken word said at the wrong time could be the trauma that somebody else is repeating in their head.
But that's the other thing we talk about is triggers. Triggers are a gift too, because triggers actually see where we're separate from ourselves, and if we can actually bring that back in, that's how we create wholeness. Because we don't mean I don't at least I don't perceive that humans are out there going, I'm going to go trigger this person today. I'm going to no, that's not what we're doing. We're not these malicious people, and yet we trigger people. Part of my production team, part of my, we've triggered each other in the making of this film, and that's been healing.
Yes, yes. Well, that's the beauty of this worldview. Because if we look at that, the universe is working for us, not against us, we have a whole different experience with everything in life. I mean, I think that perspective of thank you, universe, gratitude for everything, totally changes the vibration and the opportunity to receive a different experience.
I agree, and I think it takes you from being disempowered to empowered.
Mhm.
Right. So for me, up until 42, to my 42nd year, I thought life was happening to me,
Right.
and that I was being punished, even though I saw myself as a good person, a law-abiding citizen. But I was just like, I don't understand, why is all this happening to me? I don't get it. And but something shifted after the bombings that had me see, and it took a couple of years to see it, was that what if it's happening for me? And so I now say about trauma. Okay, so when you're planting something, whether it's, flowers or, crops, what is it mostly steeped in? Shit. It's mostly steeped in shit. You put manure on it. It smells gross. Ugh. But what trauma is that? Trauma is exactly the shit, if you will, to get us to rise up and grow and bloom. What if?
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect.
Right? And so I have a different perspective about it now. So now when I get triggered by something, I pause and go, oh, right, this is to help me grow. This is to help me bring me back to myself. It's returning me to love. And I think that's the other key here, is that what if everything that is happening in our lives is returning us to love? Because I perceive that we learn hate. For the most part, we are born into love. Now, I have yet to fully reconcile what happens when a child's conceived through a rape situation. So, but outside of that, we are born out of love, and we learn hate, right? Through different things that happen, betrayals and, abuse or whatever. We learn hate. Well, what if we actually, take these experiences and learn to love more?
I have lots of questions. Um, how do you remain fearless? Because,
I don't.
oh, okay.
You
So,
experience fear.
well, even doing this movie, it's like kind of a confession. I mean, this movie, it's real. This is, you have footage of you right as your beginning of your healing. And so was that 2000, I mean 2014 you started?
13, 2013.
Is that when the filming started too?
So actually, the filming started in 2015, I believe it was, is when the filming started. Just as I was, so it was after the trial and after I did the forgiveness thing, I had the awareness of, because I was still going on, I was still on my healing journey. And I decided maybe I need to capture some of this so that I can, later on in life, I can show people, my journey and inspire them. And so I didn't know then that I was going to be creating a film like I have now. But I want to answer, I want to share, Kathy, I still experience fear. And,
Okay.
and fear is a necessary part of the journey, because what fear tells me, fear actually has two meanings. There are things to actually be afraid of. Like if, you're driving down the street and a car, crosses the intersection, okay, that's something to be afraid of, right? And you pause and you take action.
Right.
That's one element of fear.
Right.
But there's another element of fear, which is, I now view it as face everything and rise. So I will be candid. I got the awareness to do this film 2 years ago. It has taken me that long to have the courage and the strength to get naked, because I feel like I got naked.
You did. You did. I mean, it's beautiful. That's why I said you're so fearless because, I mean, the whole time I'm watching this, it was like, oh, wow. I mean, I tip my hat and I know that this is going to shift so many people. There's so many aspects of it, the self-love part, the opportunity to take control and um not feel helpless during all of it. I mean, you still were in pain, but you were making choices. You were making positive choices for yourself, and and but it's raw. It's like a confession. I mean, it's raw.
And I want to say that, when I came out with my book Shattered, which was back in 2017, 18, at this time, I had people come out and say that, this conspiracy theory, it never happened, and there were, death threats, and so I want people to understand that this hasn't been easy for me.
Right. Oh,
But if my life is going to mean anything, and I have a message, and Wayne Dyer talks about don't leave this planet with your, song unsung.
exactly.
And this is my song.
Hmm.
And it's scary, and yet it's so rewarding because I can already see how it's changing lives.
Right.
I had a 14-year-old at one of our live premieres last week who has been severely beaten and traumatized, and was captivated watching this film. And honestly, I was in awe. And after that viewing, she asked if she could get up and share how the film had an impact in her life.
Beautiful.
And she now wants to write a book. She wants to help people. She feels empowered. She now is like, she got that her trauma isn't for nothing. And she's now on a mission at 14 to go help other kids so they don't have to go through what she's been through.
That's right. That's right.
That's what's possible.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is that I really feel the lesson. There's so many lessons in the movie, but so much of it is that to see your courage and model it, because I don't think we have heroes like that. We heroines either, but when you look at the the way the society admires athletes and actors and actresses and politicians. Um,
I
and,
know.
and now you. So that's what I again, my mission is to help as many people wake up to their divinity. And I can see that yours is as well, because what you did is you showed how your journey to realizing your divinity and that it's still unfolding, the best is yet to come conversation. And so it's other, I'm getting chills. I mean, the that's open for everyone.
Everyone. That's what I want people to understand. Everyone, even kids. Even kids. What's fascinating, Kathy, is, I wanted to create this film so that it had a wide reach,
Uh-huh.
because I believe everyone on the planet has experienced trauma in some form.
Uh-huh.
And it's now time to rise up from that trauma and let go of those stories of our past and actually embody and empower who we're meant to be, whatever that is,
Right.
whatever lights you up, literally, whatever that is, because I also believe we all have the God-given right to thrive.
Yep.
And we live in a world where there's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of people suffering out there. And I know what suffering's like. I'm sure you do on some level. And we don't need to suffer anymore. We don't need to struggle anymore.
Well, I want to bring up one other thing that was in the film that I think is really, really, really helpful, is that, and I don't remember if it was in the PTSD part with the military or if it was with Christy, but it was something about the replay of these stories, or maybe, oh no, it was Bruce Lipton. The replay of your story. So if you have, like, I was divorced at 40 with a 6-year-old, and I would actually introduce myself as a single mom. And then it was like, what am I doing labeling myself as that? But that was my story, and then I could tell my story, and I could just, ew, it was horrible. And then at a certain point, then those labels started to come off, and I didn't have to tell my story. I could be present and listen to them, hold space for them to tell their story, but my story wasn't the how sometimes people talk and they can't wait to say that. So do you want to talk about that too? Because that's, I mean, you're right now telling your story. You have this film, so you're firing up the memories without it. Um, Actually, I would say that in most cases that those were handicaps. They would freeze you, stop you from, keep you in fear. So how are you doing this? How are you sharing all of this without reliving it all?
So that's a great question. And actually, part of the filming was a reliving, and then I started. So I haven't had any flashbacks, any PTSD stuff in years. But some of my production team wanted me to go through and relive some of that, and I actually attempted to do that.
Okay.
And then I started to have, and then I woke up with nightmares and stuff, and I'm like, "Ooh, time out. This isn't working, and we need to pivot and actually tell the story from a different perspective, rather than going back and reliving it as if I'm telling it all over again." I'm like, I cannot and will not do that. Now, you have to understand, I have some Emmy award winning people on my team who told me that in order to have a film be impactful, you need to do that. I respectfully disagree, and I also feel that we are entering a new age of new ways of creating film that's not fear-based and not coming from that old way. That we actually have done this film differently on purpose.
Right.
So, with that said, I share my story coming from the other side of it, kind of like the hero's journey, right? Is like looking back on it, I go, you know what, these things happen, and I had these awarenesses, and I had these insights and epiphanies and wisdom. And so now we tell the story and plant those seeds. What if trauma is a gift? And that is a really bold statement, and yet that's what I discovered in my journey. So I tell the story from a very different perspective now. And I want to say this, it's, if we live in our story, we're missing the boat.
Right.
We're missing the boat. So the key here is, you know, yes, my film talks about my journey in rising up and healing from the bombings, and yet that's a small piece of it. It talks about how anyone can rise up from trauma. This is a documentary to inspire, empower, encourage anyone on the planet, if they choose, to give them their power back. And no matter what they've been through, remember that they can rise up from it.
Yep. And the other thing I wanted to add, there were some. It's really a good film, you guys. I hope you get to see it and maybe buy it and give it to somebody for as a Christmas present. Okay, so I um, I use the unseen a lot in my work. I sometimes call what I do supernatural marketing. And you had, towards the end of the film, you had several, well, you had sound healing, which is not seen, and that's been used since the beginning of mankind. You had acupuncture, you had, you had two or three different, channelers.
I did.
And do you want to talk about that? Because that was like, that was my woo woo corner. I loved it. but but it was kind of a bold addition for you to add that to it, because you changed I mean, the audience will be activated all the way through, and then they might get to that and like wonder. I mean, Bruce Lipton talked and Dr. Sue Morter talked, and they talk about your brain and your quantum physics, basically. But these people were channeling.
So
Okay.
I want the viewer to know most of my journey in the last 9 years and rising up from that experience, I did things that I previously would say, no way. If you had said to me, Jennifer, you're going to go through this experience and you're going to go on this journey, you're going to do all these different modalities. I thought acupuncture was woo-woo back then. I'm not kidding. Now, nutrition and chiropractor and traditional talk therapy were my edge. Now, but acupuncture helped manage my pain until my body could reset itself and stuff. So a lot of, what I talk about in the film are things that were my edge. And channeling, I actually got exposed to Christy Whitman and Christina Hill about 1.5 years ago. So what is channeling, right? And I was raised, that stuff is beyond woo-woo, right? That's just like over the top, crazy stuff, right? And I got to tell you, I'm the biggest skeptic there is. So, but what I've observed is, so I'm going to give you a side story that will come back and answer the question. As a kid, being raised in, both Catholic and Protestant, when I would sit in church, I would hear like, you can experience heaven when you die. And I would always have this question, wait a minute, I have to die to experience heaven? And I have to live in a world where I just struggle and suffer for the rest of my life? I never quite got that. So I've been on this curiosity, like, how do we create heaven on earth? Ever since I was a little kid. Now, it took me 40 plus years to figure that out, right? But in Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about it. We create heaven on earth. We have that ability. So channeling, what I got to understand in channeling is we all have the ability, if we choose, to access higher realms of consciousness. And when we access higher realms of consciousness, we have our frequency changes, our energy, our vibration changes, right? And so all of that lower level vibration stuff just dissolves. Right? And, if I had the map of human consciousness that Dr. David Hawkins has, you could actually see it. Shame and anger and all those other things have very low frequencies in the vibrational chart. As you start to rise up, and experience more love, more joy, more peace, it has a different vibration, but you also access higher levels of intelligence. So it's actually where life becomes easier. And you talk about it, the unseen. right? We were told we could never create a documentary in 6 months. It's unheard of.
Yep.
We actually apply the unseen and quantum way, and we developed a film in 6 months' time.
Perfect.
So this is what's possible for people. And so channeling, so Christy and Christina channel, Christy Whitman channels the council, Christina Hill channels Othello. Now what's fascinating is both of those women had their own trauma, and they were led down a path, a spiritual awakening path, that eventually got them to where they chose to channel. I now understand we all have the ability to do that if we choose, and we learn how to do that, and we don't have to access it. But all it is just a way of communicating in an invisible, telepathic kind of way. And it gives us guidance on how we can live an easier life, and how we can have a blissful life, and how we can, actually experience heaven on earth, even in the midst of the last 19 months of this pandemic. I'm
Right.
living proof. For most of my life, I battled with panic disorder, anxiety, and depression. Most people did not know that because I had my facade on. God forbid I let anybody know. And after all of my healing and where I am today, I can honestly say that during this pandemic, I've experienced peace and bliss
And
and thriving. It's
wonderful.
a choice.
Wonderful. Well, I love that, and I love that watching your journey and you being open to the blessings that are available for you from the seen and the unseen. And because I was curious about you, because you didn't need to add them to your film. Your film is powerful, but that actual extra part, I thought, it widened your audience and left a opportunity for people to experience something that they may have no experience with. I mean, as an activation.
Yeah. So there's a couple of intentions around that. One
Hmm.
is what they speak about is actually healing. So when Christy and Christina channel, what happens is they increase their vibration, and then the spirit plane, comes in. There's actually an energetic transmission that happens. So anybody that listens to that segment will have a healing. Even myself,
Oh
even
yeah,
you,
I
right?
was there.
There's a healing that happens every single time that you watch it. There'll be a healing that happens. So first and foremost, you could think it's crazy. I don't really care. Just sit there and listen and enjoy the healing, because you will get one.
Right.
But secondly, it is actually to plant the seed for where the next film is going. And the next film, we are transitioning from what I call transformational, because this film is a transformational film. But the next film, we're really getting into what I call bliss formation.
Perfect.
We want to we want to show people how they can transform their lives and have bliss.
Okay, well, if you need people, I've got a whole stable of people that I could recommend for that film.
Thank you.
I've been doing this for 21 years. So my hope is that people will understand that if you read Jennifer's book Shattered, that would be first part of the journey possibly, and then keep going and keep giving yourself the good perspective of how life can be for you, that you aren't stuck. That's what I'm seeing. It's very interesting. There's a camp of people that as soon as the lockdown happened, it was like game on. Okay, and that's what you did. Let's make a movie. But a lot of people are kind of stuck, like they liked the old way. They knew how to operate in that. That seemed safe. They don't know how to operate in this. And your movie will help give them ideas of how to operate in the new world that is going to be a much more loving and kind place.
Yeah, and I would say two things. Two things. One is be your very best friend. When you're going on this journey, you've got to learn to be your own cheerleader. So you look in that mirror and you remind yourself how amazing you are, even though you might not feel it and even though you might not believe it. That's one. The second thing is this, is that perceive it like going on a treasure hunt, right? So I say to people, look for the good in it. And I'll tell you, when somebody said that to me after the bombings, look for the good in it? Are you crazy? Yes. And I now say that, look for the good in it. You might not access that right away. What might come up is all the crap. Just write it out, let it out. Eventually, it happens. It's like looking for treasure, looking for gold. It's not on the surface. You actually got to dig within.
Right.
And just keep yourself on that journey, and you will rise up if you continue to do that. It's all about going within. It's all about returning to self and returning to love.
Right. I think time does heal wounds, but this is much more than just hindsight. What we're talking about is somebody being a powerful um, human and choosing their destiny rather than being a victim of it. And that is the biggest message. Plus, there's so much more in it. I mean, really, you felt the whole film is like, go, Jennifer, go.
And I want people, actually, I want everybody that's watching it to be inspired to be that for themselves and know that we've got your back and we're going to help you through this, because I promise you our world will be different. If people actually take this on for themselves, we will live in a world that is so much different, so much better than where we are now.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. We're going to need to wrap up, but thank you so much for this beautiful gift and your courage. Because I mean, at the part of it, it was like, whoa, I don't know if I could do this. I really salute you on your sharing, and I know it's going to help I mean, millions of people. I really, truly, I mean, that's the gift of all of this is you're cataloging and you're sharing in a format where people might not read, but they'll watch a movie and they'll go along and they will be inspired and activated by everything that you've collected there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you.
Yes. So Jennifer, one more time, let's make sure that everyone knows how to get a hold of you. I have put your banner up and your information in the comments, but could you, for the audience, give us ways to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can, if you're interested in watching the film, you can go to movies.influencer.me, which I know you've posted in the comments. If you want to learn more about me and access some of my books, you can go to jenniferkauffman.com. But more importantly, just stay tuned. Follow us on social media. We're actually creating a movement, and the movement is all about rising and thriving. And stay tuned because more is going to be rolling out around that. And so get on board, join the movement, because we're going places and we want you with us.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I hope to see you again soon. We'll have to do this again.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm welcome to come back. Thank you.
Thank you.